Have you ever set your alarm for 7 a.m. with big dreams in your heart and then woken up at 8, carrying a strange sense of shame inside? This is the story of an ordinary man, Salim, a hospital security guard. No high position, no power. Just a uniform, a responsibility, and an alarm he fought with every single day. He watched other people's lives being saved, while his own life was slowly slipping away. One day, just one morning, his absence threw the entire hospital into chaos. And the moment arrived where a decision had to be made. Old habits, or a new Salim. This isn't a story about waking up early. This is a story about defeating yourself. So how did 7 a.m. become a security guard's secret weapon? Stay with me till the end to find out. Salim, a 40-year-old hospital security guard whose uniform is always clean, but who has faint shadows under his eyes, is stationed at Gate 3 of the city's busiest public hospital. For Salim, 7 a.m. is not just a time, it's a trial. After a night shift, when the alarm rings at 7 a.m., grand plans stir in his mind. His son's better future, his own health, and dreams of a regular life. Yet more often than not, he hits the snooze button and wakes up at 8 a.m., feeling a slight twinge of guilt. Outside the emergency room, the wails of ambulance sirens, the creak of stretchers, and the hurried steps of nurses. These are Salim's companions of the night. As morning breaks, the atmosphere changes. Sunlight streams through the glass doors. The chai vendors' calls echo, and relatives of patients stand in the liminal space between hope and fear. Salim observes it all, but often feels left behind. On the other hand, there is Nurse Amna, organized, punctual, and always smiling. She often tells Salim, "Time doesn't change us, we change time." Salim's supervisor, Mr. Farouk, keeps a close eye on the clock and sees 7 a.m. attendance as a symbol of discipline. Salim's small room, with a slowly ticking clock on the wall, the brightly lit hospital gate, and the restless atmosphere of the emergency ward. Salim's life doesn't unfold through a single big accident, but through small, everyday moments. As soon as his night shift ends, his legs feel heavy. His eyes start to burn, and only one desire echoes in his mind: just a little more sleep. When the alarm on his phone rings at 7 a.m., he jolts awake, makes promises to himself for a few seconds, and then hits the snooze button. When he finally opens his eyes at 8 a.m., the first feeling is not fatigue, but guilt. Supervisor Farouk's gaze has now shifted, not just to the clock, but to Salim as well. One day, a red line appears next to Salim's name in the attendance register for being late. He wants to say something, but words get stuck in his throat. Nurse Amna's slightly concerned look makes his silence feel even heavier. At home, the problems are different. Salim's son tries to wake him before school, but he cannot respond because of his exhaustion. His wife's silence, which never becomes a complaint but always turns into questions, adds weight to his heart. He gives himself excuses. "I'm not a morning person. I need my sleep." But deep down, he knows the problem is not just sleep. That day was not like an ordinary day for Salim. His night shift became unusually long, one emergency after another, screams, running footsteps, and unending anxiety. When morning finally came, his eyes were burning and his mind felt completely empty. He told himself, "Today, the snooze button is justified." But fate had decided to test him on that very day. Exactly at 7 a.m., an emergency situation erupted at gate number 3. The relatives of an elderly patient lost control, and the atmosphere began to deteriorate rapidly. Supervisor Farouk called Salim over the radio, but Salim was not there. At that moment, he was asleep in his room, his phone lying silently beside him. A few minutes later, the situation was brought under control. But one crucial truth had already surfaced. Salim's absence had created a crack in the system. As soon as Salim reached the hospital, he was called into the office. Farouk's voice was firm, but that day it carried more disappointment than anger. "This is not your last warning, Salim. This is a decisive moment." That sentence echoed somewhere deep inside Salim. For the first time, he realized the issue was not just about his job, it was about his self-respect. That evening, sitting on a bench outside the hospital, Salim noticed Mr. Riaz, the same bookshop-owning teacher who occasionally came by. Riaz simply said, "Sometimes life stops us midway just to show us a mirror." This crisis made everything clear for Salim. There were now two paths: either surrender himself to old excuses or truly turn 7 a.m. into his secret weapon. This was the turning point where the story was about to change. After that, Salim promised himself he would try to change, but the path to change is never straight. In the early days, he did wake up at the 7 a.m. alarm, but his body refused to cooperate. His head felt heavy, his steps wobbled. And even while standing at the hospital gate, it felt as though sleep was still chasing him. One day, he sat down briefly during duty. Supervisor Farouk's sharp voice immediately forced him back on his feet. The intention had changed, but the reality was still harsh. Salim tried to go to bed early at night, but habits built over years do not break easily. The glow of the mobile phone, worries circling in his mind, and fear of the coming day all kept him awake. His wife appreciated his effort, yet concern still showed on her face. His son was happy that his father had started having breakfast with him. But in Salim's heart, a fear lingered that all of this might be temporary. At the hospital, the pressure continued to rise. A minor misunderstanding caused a patient's relatives to raise their voices, and Salim had to stand on the front line. In that moment, his hands were trembling, but he held himself together. One encouraging glance from Nurse Omna became his support. Sitting alone at night, Salim thought, change does not come by merely changing time, but by changing one's thinking. At times, he felt confident. At others, he doubted himself. These were his personal ups and downs. Sometimes a step forward, sometimes half a step back. But one thing had become clear. The difficulties were increasing, yet Salim was no longer running away. He was standing firm, no matter how hard the path was. That morning was unusually quiet. A soft light spread across the sky, and a cool breeze moved through gate number 3 of the hospital. Salim's watch announced exactly 7 a.m., and this time he was awake, fully awake. His heart was pounding, as if this moment were the final question of an exam. He took a deep breath and straightened his uniform. Today, he was not going to run. Suddenly, a commotion broke out at the emergency entrance. A young patient was brought in critical condition, the relatives out of control. The crowd grew, voices rose. This was the moment when Salim's absence used to be felt, but today he stepped forward. With a firm voice, he cleared the way, controlled the people, and signaled to Nurse Omna. For a few moments, all eyes were on him, and Salim did not step back. Just then, Supervisor Farouk arrived at the scene. There was no panic in Salim's work, only confidence. The crowd was brought under control, and the patient was moved inside. Silence returned, but the storm inside Salim had already settled. Farouk looked at him, this time not at the clock, but at the man. A brief nod, yet it carried years of approval. Salim closed his eyes. He remembered his son's smile, his wife's silent prayers, and all the mornings when he had lost to himself. For the first time, it felt like 7 a.m. had truly become his secret weapon. This victory was not on a stage filled with applause, but it echoed loudly in his heart. He understood then the real battle was not against sleep, but against himself. And today, he had won. Salim's life did not suddenly become perfect, but a deep calm settled within him. He realized that the solution was not in some magical transformation, but in the small choices made every day. He turned 7 a.m. into a purpose, not a punishment or an obligation, but a promise. The alarm was no longer an enemy, but a reminder. At the hospital, his presence began to stand out. One day, Supervisor Farouk said a short sentence, "Well handled today." Those words were no less than a medal for Salim. Nurse Amna smiled and handed him a cup of tea, and Salim felt his confidence returning, slowly but firmly. The atmosphere at home changed as well. Salim now had breakfast with his son and encouraged him before dropping him off at school. Seeing pride in his son's eyes filled Salim's heart. One evening, his wife simply said, "You're not changing? You're coming back." That sentence washed away all the fatigue inside Salim. One morning, standing at the hospital gate, Salim watched the sun rise. He remembered the mornings he used to sleep through, mornings that were actually opportunities. Difficult days would still come. Sometimes the snooze button would be pressed, sometimes his steps would falter. But the difference was that he wouldn't give up. Salim had learned that the secret to success is not waking up early, but respecting time. And when a person gives time its due, time gives back in return dignity, peace, and belief in oneself.